Oh.
What's up, humans? Luke Rain here, welcoming you back to the Human Music Podcast. This is episode 58, Dojo TV Producer Questions, Volume 2. We went live again on Dojo TV to tackle the best questions the chat had to offer us. Big up, chat! We touch on phrasing, vocals, and leads, new tools we're excited about, sound design, mudpies, arrangement exercises, and how to push through on music when you're out of energy. Make sure to support our sponsors, Dojo TV, free producer live stream classes from the Producer Dojo Senseis, and where we recorded this episode. No reason not to be there. It's free and it's a dope community in the Discord. Next, the weekly download, where you can learn from Il Gates in his private weekly group lessons and get access to over 230 more episodes in the archive for just $20 a month. A lot of the best skills I've learned as a producer came right there from the weekly download, and insane value. Next, guest practices, where you can learn from Seth Drake at the Approach Institute. He's the best engineer we know, and you can learn some super high-level mixing and mastering skills from this dude. Your first class at guest practices is free. Finally, Gvngaroo Records music distribution, where you can get unlimited uploads for under $10 a year. Get your tunes to all the goons with Gvngaroo and get your music out there. All right. Without further ado, let's get on into the episode.
Hello, people of Earth. This is Tesco with Rip Kenny and Trap Jesus, and you're listening to the Human Music Podcast. Woo!
Human Music Podcast. I like it. Yo, Dojo TV!
Yeah.
What's up, everybody? It is the Human Music Podcast, and we are back again, like we are every other Tuesday. But how y'all doing? Put a little GIF or something in the chat to let us know how you're feeling. We got some howdies. We got some Clint Eastwood and SpongeBob. That's a good range of howdy emotions right there.
That's a wide range.
On a scale from Clint Eastwood to SpongeBob, how howdy are you feeling today? Please let us know in the chat. Also, let us know if that makes no sense to you. But what's up? I'm Luke Rain. I'm here with my good peoples, Tesco and Rip Kenny, and we are here to answer your questions today. Or actually, I guess you guys right there. In this camera right chat. Here. Yeah, poke them.
Big up.
We're pointing at them. Yeah, we're live. What's up, Gus class? That's my friend Gus. Yo, so.
What's good? What's up, Chef Womp?
Chef Womp, Ethan in the building. Yeah. Hope y'all ready with some questions, because otherwise, the fuck are we even doing here? I'm scared.
Tesco was playing some guitar before we hopped on stream, so if there's no questions, I'm down to just listen to him jam around a little bit.
Just do an improv sesh based off the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, they're saying howdy, just start playing some country. We'll
I was gonna say, someone posts a meme and then Tesco has to come up with a riff that fits the style of the meme.
All right, we'll do that after though.
Yeah.
That's the good stuff, the meat and potatoes, before we get to the spice,
Amen. Yeah, this episode we're gonna be doing another Q&A, because we got a lot of good folks asking questions to us all the time, and we don't get to them enough, so we want to make sure we do that, but also let y'all live humans also get out there. Hey, I got a note that on the live stream the volumes are a little different. Tell us how we did on that
turn up
change.
Check
turn up 1 2 1
big up chat.
Big up, turn up, all the ups.
Turnips, other root vegetables,
turning up vegetables,
beets, potatoes, yams. I'm in.
Punch and pie. What's up, Nard?
We don't have any Nards.
What's up, Gus?
Oh, bye. But yeah, so I guess since nobody's asked a question yet, I'm going to break out the handy dandy listener questions Google Doc we always have running, and we'll start right there. Somebody on YouTube named Carrie McBride asked, so like, I'd really be interested in hearing 3 music producers talking about pain every day by clipping. I feel it'll take 3 producers to detect it. Oh, you know what? I'm not going there. I should have read that question before I read that question out loud, because that was for a reaction video. So what we actually want to get on is Abraham Prado, friend of the dojo, friend of the pod.
Hey, shout out.
What's up, Abe? Asked, talking about doing vocals and phrasing them. Like, how do you make more with less and use silence as an instrument in your vocal work? And I know at this point, all of us are doing some vocal work. So actually good timing on that question. I want to hear what Tesco has to say first, because he's our resident working the hardest on vocals right now.
True.
All right, bet. So one thing I find is like being really intentional with if you actually want silence or if you want something that seems like silence and just really drastically pulls back but isn't quite silent. And finding those times when all these elements drop out to maybe explore another part of that mix cube that's further out back. So, you know, if you have a phrase that's very spacious, maybe you could have some sort of ad lib that just repeats the phrase and is way in the background. Or you could fill that space with some sort of delay or something to give that vocal a different kind of feel in the mix, gives it a bit more articulation and dimension, and just makes it feel a bit more 3D. So I find, you know, rarely do I actually want a total full silence for that quarter note or eighth note or however long. I typically want to take advantage, at least with the reverb tails and stuff dying off or the reverses or something. I want to, you know, use that as a moment to show off one more kind of cool thing that vocal is capable of. And this also applies for drop basses, lead synths, any kind of lead elements.
Nice. Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, you know, any lead element that's not a vocal, a lot of these same rules still apply because, you know, it's the thing you're paying attention to. And, you know, as if you ever watch Rip Kinney's Awesome Summit video from last year, you don't want to fill up all of the space with your main thing, because then you're just going to have this block of sound that never leaves. And if you leave strategic spots where it's not playing, and you get a rhythm to the on and off of it. And want to dive into that a little bit, Evan?
Yeah, honestly, I just want to first of all reinforce that exact thing. Like, it is so easy to just fill the space, especially with vocals. And like, the tendency when you're working in the DAW is just like fill everything up. All right, is there a space? Put something there. Like, not necessarily the most beneficial. So just make sure that you're not thinking like that, you know, like you're remembering to leave as much space as you actually can, because the more space you leave, the more impactful the elements that are there become. So the question was vocal phrasing and how to best approach it. First of all, painfully. That's how. Like, it's difficult. It takes a lot of writing and rewriting and trying it, and it doesn't seem quite right, and redoing it, and it takes hours. So first of all, you got to be okay with that. Like, rarely the first thing that you write and sing is going to be like perfect. So you have to keep an open mind to the process and sing it, see how it feels, and then adjust the rhythm and timing. One thing that I think is important to note when you're writing vocals and you're thinking about how the phrasing between sections works, it's always a good idea to, like, if your verse is like long drawn out words and you get to maybe like a pre-chorus, maybe like up the tempo or feel of like how fast your vocals are coming. Or the opposite, even if your verse is like kind of a lot of syllables, maybe in the pre-chorus start to lengthen things out. In your phrasing, it makes each section more impactful and like deliberate sounding if you have those nice differences in like how you're presenting the vocal in the separate sections. And then when you get to like the chorus, obviously, well, you should keep in mind like the energy level of the section when you're thinking about how to phrase the vocals. And there's many ways that you can like basically shorten a phrase, leave out some words or whatever to kind of like say the same thing, but to fit your phrasing style. And you'd be surprised when you sit down to write vocals, the tendency is also to like almost write like complete sentences, and it's just completely unnecessary to do. Just think of like how it feels. Like, does the ethos of what you're saying get across? And then use the least amount of words to do that, right? So those are the two things that really came to mind when we're talking about this. But just got to try it, see how it feels, and then just keep chipping away at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Nard just dropped a comment in the chat. He says he's often found that some vocals may start before the beat, and there are impact words that ride with the swing of the music, and that's a really good point. Like figuring out, like, where on the bar does your phrase fit? And then usually you want to use, at least for sections and chunks of your song, similar patterns inside of that phrasing. So maybe in a phrase, you start right on the kick. Your first word always happens right on the kick, and then you like stop on the snare. So dump it a bump bump bump, dump it a bump dun dun, dump it a bump dun 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 bump it a bump dun dun. Like you switch it up a little on the second half to give it a little vibe. But that's like your general vibe is that every time the snare hits, you stop. You stop saying your words. That's one example. But then people get to expect that. And then when you change it up slightly, it gives a nice variation to that pattern. But thinking about like people think about like how to arrange the words inside of their rhyme scheme or inside of the rhythm of it. But you've also got to think how to arrange specific silences, because like if you just, so anybody can like talk all of the time, but it doesn't sound as cool as when there's like a spot, to like, you say something cool and then give the listener that half a second to like process what they just said. And like Tesco said, then you got a little hole, you can put a little ad lib, you can repeat the thing, you can, accentuate or, put a little exclamation point on it at the end. There's a lot of good ways to make the lyric process and the phrasing a lot more interesting and a lot more intricate by specifically not talking all the time. That's something I definitely had to learn as I went on.
Amen to that. One thing too, you can always go back and just delete every other line, starting with the second, and then just see what that sounds like. I think a lot of times, like, it just feels wrong to leave a section so bare, but when you actually hear it, even if you don't want to perform it that way in the moment, when you go back and manually edit it and just hear what it sounds like with all that space, I found, at least for me in those moments, it just like helped me hear the result, which made it that much more real to me and like made it sound better in a way, if that makes any sense at all.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
And like, then again, like, just like you're saying on that, like say instead of having all these lines you wrote one after the other, just take all of the lines, but just space them out a bar from each other. And then you have a place to like checkerboard in an instrument. Like maybe you say a line and then you do like a counter melody off of that in the space that you've now built yourself in an instrument. And then you've got this A-B thing. And now, you don't have to write so many words to fill up your whatever space you have for the verse or the chorus. You've got this, this play and interchange between the words and the music. And that can also be really powerful.
Amen. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good question.
So I think the first question that came in through the chat from good old Chef Womp: what are the most exciting things you found in the last 2 weeks? I'll start with one that I actually found today. It's kind of a simple one, but for my music, like I like kind of dropped my jaw, which is like, if you have a really distorted kind of crispy high end it just is like a little brittle or a little too harsh. If you have like FabFilter Saturn. If you just take and split 2 bands and have, maybe like between 2 and 3 kilohertz and up in one band, and then every, the rest below, turn that band off. And on that high band, use I think it's like warm tape or whatever. I think it's like the default. But if you use the warm tape just on that high end, it like saturates it and distorts it like more, but it smooths everything out and makes it feel less like digital and like harsh, and just makes everything like way more
very, very way more stronger.
Yeah, very, very way more smoother. And it doesn't like muffle it, which is the issue, because if you take like a high shelf and just like bring it down and try and like tame it, it's like very noticeable that you've done that. It kind of feels like you've taken some life out of it. But doing this, it just tames it without ruining it. And I don't like, it just has to do with, I'm sure, the analog modeling of whatever tape saturation, but it works really well. So if you make really distorted, loud sounds, that will be a game changer for you.
Nice.
Love it. How about you, Luke?
This was stuff we learned in the last 2 weeks, that question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Man, I mean, they got all the DuckTales on Disney Plus, so woo! That's always cool.
Hell
I
yeah.
started watching that, but on music
That's
stuff,
the jam. Podcast over.
Yeah, right. Drops mic, goes watches more DuckTales. But one thing I've been playing with is I got Pitch Wheel from Quick Quack. It's a plugin that
did you intend on doing that? Talk about DuckTales, and then you got a Quick Quack thing. That's a little.
Nah, I was just thinking about
DuckTales.
I do like how that worked out, though.
You're born for this, bud.
I didn't quite catch that. I'm glad you pointed that out. That is a little cool.
Yes, it was completely intentional, and I will take all the credit. But I really do dig this plugin, and one thing I like about it that the made me go spend money on it is that Ilgate says it's like the pitch plugin that leaves the least artifacts. And I've done a lot of different ways of doing pitch stuff, and one thing I really like about this is that since it's in a VST form, I can throw it on an entire group or on the entire master if I wanted to, and automate it. And so like doing, as opposed to like, chopping the audio and like, changing the pitch of each individual one and letting, Reason, or for a lot of people, Ableton's algorithm, hopefully make that a pretty good pitch shift. It's like everything's going as one, everything's bending continuously. I can draw in the automation curve I want on the entire group, which has been really cool. I've been really digging that. I've redone some intros and buildups that were kind of meh on songs that I otherwise really like, and realizing like, oh yeah, the intro isn't really grabby enough. Let me see what I can do about it, and doing some different things. And this has been one of the things I've been really digging. And also it's got this cool functionality. It's got like gravity functionality and these different, like a few different weird settings on it. So like if you move it and you have this setting on or off, it wobbles. And Chef Womp actually just dropped that in the chat. It'll like go, like you move the needle over here and it'll go whoop, 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 unless you turn that setting off. Yeah, it's really cool. So it's like I'm looking into getting into that on mudpies, and seeing what kind of weird wobbles and wiggles I can get on various sounds, see what that does on a sub, see what that does on a lead, see what that does on a vocal, just get some whoa, whoa, whoa. Like I'm pretty pumped to dive into this. That's my current favorite plugin.
Let me ask you, is it like a transparent pitch shift? Like, or does it mess with the formants as well? Like when you pitch a vocal up and it starts to be like, 5 to 7 semitones, it gets a little chipmunky.
I haven't dug super deep into it, but I think there's actually a second like half of it that you can kick out that actually has a formant section. So you can just shift the formants or you can shift them together, which is pretty cool, or opposite. So, I've got like, I had been doing stuff like this with Little Altar Boy, but I really like Little Altar Boy for a lot of stuff. But one thing about it is that the pitch is not continuous. Like the formant is a continuous, like gets down to the 0.1, gets down to a decimal place when you're turning it, but the actual like pitch stops on semitones. And so it's like, all right, that's pretty cool, but I like the ability to do the continuous sweep on pitch wheel.
Sick.
Super Tesco.
One thing I've been doing, Ableton Creative Extensions, Pitch Hack is amazing. Shout out Stefano, my boy here in my hometown, for showing me that trick. One thing I've been doing a lot lately is using basically using plugins that kind of undo each other. So I'll use Pitch Hack to speed things up an octave at 1/4 speed, and then I'll use LFO Tool to slow it down. And then LFO Tool has some like cool fade-in modes you can mess with. Works really nice for vocals and basses. I also really like, you can mess with the audio, use a different warp mode and like pitch it down or up an octave.
Wait, how do you
Alter Boy to like reverse that?
Sorry, not to cut you off. How do you slow things down with LFO Tool?
With halftime and pitch hack.
Oh, okay. Pitch hack and
did
then
I say
halftime.
LFO Tool?
Yeah. I was wondering that too, because you were showing us yesterday how you're messing with.
Yeah, I know. I was like, did you figure something else out
halftime
from last night to now?
My bad.
Yeah.
LFO Tool is really sick too, though. I definitely suggest using that. I use that all the time to give just like, if you have any sounds that are basically just sausaged, I'll just like give it a little wiggle.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, that really helps. But yeah, basically just like using plugins to like undo what the last one did. Sometimes you get really cool results. Like in Pitch Hack, you have the reverse knob. If you reverse the audio and put the reverse up, it'll like do the reverses in different places. So it ends up giving you a totally different result. Stuff like that.
Actually, speaking of that, one thing that I really like to do in Ableton is if you have like a vocal or something that you want to like glitch out, put it on play forward and repeat forward on beats mode, like the 2 forward arrows, and then pitch it up, to where you hear like the timing of glitches that you like, because as you pitch it up, it like changes, right? So until you get like a timing or rhythm of glitches that sounds nice, consolidate it, pitch it back down with Complex or Complex Pro, and then it's at the original pitch, but it has all those glitches, and then you can just like take and like chop in little bits of that you like into the main thing, and it'll have like a nice little way to spice up whatever you're working on.
Nice. That's like cool. a mini mud pie.
Yeah.
By the way, I just realized instead of LFO Tool, I think I meant to say Little Altar Boy for the pitch stuff. So if you pitch the clip down, then you use Altar Boy to like put the pitch back up and distort it a bit. Yeah.
That drive, I really like the drive in Little Altar Boy. It's got a good vibe.
Yo, that's such a underrated distortion too. Like you can take the most basic like piano or string sound or whatever, and like put the formants up really slightly and distort it past 50%, and the sound will like, as it moves through specific octaves, it'll fall apart in different ways, and you'll get this like very like digitized, like glitchy, weird formanty version of the sound. Like you could take the most basic thing and make it sound unique with that distortion. It's really cool.
I'm definitely going to try that trick.
ASAP. Yeah.
ASAP,
yeah, I'll show you.
Actually got to do, man, I'm going to try a few of these things. I've got to redo like a vocal chop on a drop for a track that's confirmed coming out on a Dojo, on the remix EP. Remix a Dojo classic that me and Shoes, shouts out to Shoes, the homie.
Shout out.
Getting settled in Boise, Idaho. The Boise. The boy from Boise. But yeah, let's cut to this next question. Shouts to Gus in the chat, Gus Class. who asks, how often do you make mud pies? Do you use mud pies in the middle of a daytime session, or is it mostly just dedicated night sessions for this? And then there's a part 2, any recent VSTs or since you've been smushing sounds with the pies. We already covered that a little, but we can touch back on that at the end. Let's take those first couple of questions first. Like, first, how often do you make mud pies? I vary on that shit. Sometimes I'll make a few in a row. Sometimes I go a hot minute without making any. So I've got no actual concrete answer for that. Anybody else have a real answer for how often they make mud pies?
How about you, Evan? You do more sound designing music.
Yeah, I mean, like kind of like you though. I think I've mentioned it in the podcast a few times, but like when I have a nighttime session, it's like, what do I feel inspired to do? And sometimes I'm just kind of in a sound design kick, and that's like the thing that I want to do, and I'll end up making a lot of mud pies for that. But recently, I've found my sound design sessions spent more making like really interesting presets with like racks and macros and stuff. So I have like a really nice instrument that I can use for a few different things in a few different ways, because I feel like when I'm in a writing session, I don't want to slow down, because a lot of the stuff is like, you know, gritty, distorted, cool basses, but then it like has to fit like a melody or bass line for the stuff that I'm writing. And when I have to stop and like pitch things around, and then, you know, some sounds do really well pitched around in audio and some just don't. Especially I find when I've got like the gnarlier, grittier stuff, like it doesn't love to be pitched around. So if I spend that time making like a really nice patch that I can use in a bunch of different ways, I'm going to get a lot of use out of that. Whereas like a mud pie where I, you know, spend some time and get like a big group of one shots, like the best of that mud pie, and throw it together. Those are really useful for like, you know, interjections, but you can use almost anything for an interjection sound, right? So, and I've already done so many of those. I have so many little things that I could use for that.
Shouts out to the Get Dead bass pack available in your
interjections galore
marketplace.
Yeah. But so yeah, that's kind of what I've been doing for my time that I would be using for mud pies. But there is an exception for when it's in a writing session and I have like a bass line and I've just kind of hit a wall for like something that is what I would, you know, deem really cool for the bass line that I'm using. And I'll just take the MIDI from the bass line and set a timer on my phone and do 15 minutes of taking the best sound that I have that I like that fits the song currently, and just going ham in Serum and just generating a bunch of stuff that fits the bass line that I know is working in the song notes wise. And then just go back and like, you know, you have the loop of that MIDI and say like, I need the first bar to have something cool. And then like maybe the last 2 beats to have something really cool. And I'll just like, you know, use the loop function and then isolate that first bar and then sweep through all of the different loop backs of that mud pie to find like which first bar is the coolest out of all these, and then throw that in. Which I find to be a really useful, like I don't love stopping a writing session to do something like that, but if I'm stuck and I need something cool that's got to fit like the notes, like I would say probably 1 in 3, 1 in 2 sessions, I end up doing something like that just to kind of inject some freshness into the sounds that I'm using. So that's kind of how I divide it.
Nice.
Yeah. I want to just underline that bit that you said about like, sometimes the best place to do a mud pie is when you've already got your loop. You've already got like, this is definitely the main thing of my drop. I really like it. And then I'll just go through the whole drop and I'll just do a mud pie on that and then go find the one shots, but then just pop them right into the spot they fit in. You know, it's like, you know, okay, thinking about PVRD. Okay, here we presented. This is the main one. Need like a little variation in the second one. Not in the third one, but then something extra crazy in the fourth one. And then maybe in drop 2, do something trippy right at the beginning, where like you think it's going to start the same as drop 1, but then it does this weird pitch and delay thing that oh, that's crazy, and there's no drums yet, and then the drums hit and it drops back into the thing you were expecting. Like, I really like doing that. I'm a big fan of that. That's probably the most consistent single spot that I do mud pies, aside from, the odd nighttime session where that's all I'm doing today.
Yeah. And one other thing that just popped into mind that I don't do as much, but I've always loved the result when I do it. It's an interesting one. So when Dylan and I were working on the Nazi Punks remix, one thing that we did was
Fuck off!
Yeah. We literally took our rough draft, like the rough mix of the track, and mud pied the entire track, like the master. Just went through it a couple times, the entire track playing, and like, granulator and like pitching it around and just fucking with it. And then you can just take little chunks of that and like fit it into the main track. And that, because you have like drums and like a lot of stuff happening in the master, obviously, you just get a lot of weird stuff that you never, ever would have gotten unless you actually did that. Procedurally, it's a bit strange to do though, right? Because by the time you have like a full song, you're like, okay, here's my song. How do I just like, polish it, right? You don't think of like, I'm at the end. Now, how do I destructively like manipulate this and still fit it back into the track? It's kind of weird to think about it like that. So doesn't always make it into my process, but it's a really powerful thing to do if you're stuck at the end trying to spice things up.
Yeah, that's really cool. And that's stuff I've heard like Mr. Bill say too, like glitch out the master. Like there's no rules. I know we like to talk about the 5 phases of making a song. Phase 1 is the composition phase. Phase 2 is the arrangement. Phase 3 is details and transitions. Then the mix, then the master. But you don't have to do shit in that order, and you can do trippy random shit at any point if you experiment, break rules, please. This is really useful to remember that all of these 5 things have to happen in some order. Like your track needs composition and arrangement and details and a mix and master. Sometimes, like making rap beats, I'll often do a phase 1 just super loop. Cool, I got 9 sounds. They all work on top of each other. I will mix and master that super loop. It's 8 bars. And I'm like, all right, now I know what this shit sounds like. It's really easy to arrange when I know what it sounds like, because it's like, I don't know, will this shaker by itself work as a section? Well, it will now that it's EQ'd and has that sick reverb on it.
Nice.
But before that, I never would have thought to do that.
Interesting. It's funny to think of that as a creative technique, right? Like, because it is such like an engineering type thing. But I think figuring out how the track is going to sound before that section is done does 2 things really well. The first and most important, you're probably not going to feel like you need a bunch more stuff to fill it out once you've done that, right? It forces you to be like, how do I maximize the elements here?
Yeah.
And that in and of itself is so useful to think about. So often, like, because you haven't treated the sounds that are there properly already, add a delay to that pluck line that like fills out the space or whatever. You're like thinking of like, do I need another pad or an ARP or something to fill it? No, just take the thing that you have and like use the tools that you know how to use to make that the full background element, right? And the other thing is, it just reminds you that pretty much thinking of anything in a different way is a creative solution to get you out of being stuck, right? Like we've talked about, like, you're not going to think your way out of whatever problem. You have to try different stuff. And it's like pretty much trying anything other than what you're already doing, like just listening to the loop, is a good way forward. That also just by itself is a really useful thing to keep in mind. It doesn't necessarily matter what you're doing, as long as you're pushing forward through your listening to the loop that you have phase, you're going to get somewhere, right?
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
On that note, on mud pies, just to wrap up the question,
Mud pies themselves, for me personally, I totally agree with what you guys are saying, and I do it once the phrase is actually fleshed out. Then I'll go through and I'll start mud pieing it. And for a lot of people, I find they could actually make their initial phrase a bit simpler and then articulate it a bit better through mud pieing and stuff like that, rather than trying to make that initial phrase the craziest thing.
I like that.
But one thing I do really often, like almost every day, is do a sound generation session. So kind of different from sound design. Maybe I'm just, trying to invent new stuff here, but mentally I see it as a different thing because I'm not stopping to design the most perfect sound. Typically what I do is I'll have like my generator, whether that's a synth or whatever, I'll have a resample channel, and then I'll have another channel where I'm just storing all the samples. And in Ableton, you can just hit tab to go between the screens, and I'll just put it on that third channel. That way you don't accumulate any garbage samples accidentally and pull them in. But what I do is I just keep resampling to that second channel, and I don't stop too long to question which variation is better than the other. I really just aim to create a couple hundred samples, which is super, super doable, when without trying too hard. And then I'll filter out the bad ones throughout the next couple of days as I'm using them. But with low effort, you could create like so many variations on these sounds. And oftentimes, like, I'll take maybe a new sample pack I just downloaded, and then I'll Frankenstein all the samples in a way that is more in line with my style and like remix that sample pack for myself. Maybe I'll take like a 808 that I really like that I've been using a lot, and then I'll just go through Isotope Trash and Saturn, and I'll just find like all these like cool new distortions I can throw on it, and like, all these variations of the same distortion cranked at like different parameters, and I just find that way is a lot easier mentally to not have to think about it too hard. You don't get caught up in having to make the decision in the moment. Is this good or do I move on? And then you have hundreds of samples to reference against each other, and it makes it really, really clear which ones are the clear winners. And it's also
if you have like 5 things, you're like, oh, this one's good. But if you have, 100 things, you're like, those 5 all sucked.
Yeah,
clearly
totally.
When I listen to them against these other ones.
And oftentimes too, like sometimes it's the ones I thought were sick in the moment that I end up deleting later, and some that I overlooked in the moment that end up being like the ones. And the reason I really like this as well is because I really subscribe to the idea, whether it's in music or life or anything, like the more limitations you willingly put on yourself, there's like a liberation and like self-expression within that. Like, I don't necessarily think that you're meant to know or do all of the things. That's why like everybody here makes bass music and they don't really care about tuning a country snare, right? So by really like going in on the rabbit hole of exactly what you like, whether it's like one snare that you've used in your hottest tracks, you should do a sound generation session on that and make like 50 variations of that snare. And you'll quickly start to realize how these really like little aspects of your production, whether it's just like one sample or, one serum patch or whatever, can yield like hundreds of different results from it. And then each one of those can be like a rabbit hole in and of itself,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amen. So you touched on it a little by saying like Trash and Saturn or whatever you said about which VSTs you like smushing sounds with. But to get to the last part of Gus's question, what VSTs do you guys like to use to get this sound sounding extra weird without making it extra crispy and unusable?
So pitch hack and halftime, like I mentioned earlier. Halftime is really cheap and pitch hack is free if you have Max for Live. I really like those. I really like Quanta. I really like Looperator for my mud pies. I like anything that has Oh, Portal is really great too. Anything that has a bunch of effects chained together, anything that sounds quote unquote expensive, anything that makes me not have to try really hard and that can just, for lack of better way to put it, just shit out all sorts of variations for me. And I say it like that because I am not thinking in the moment. I am fully in creative mode, and then I edit, and then I enter editing mode before I judge anything. So any of those effects that have like a bunch of effects in one, that's why I like Trash. That's why I like Saturn. There's like multiple stages. You could do multi-band, and Trash, you have different little modules within that. Yes, for specifics, Pitch Hack, Trash 2, and Halftime for me.
Nice.
How about you guys?
Evan?
Yeah, this is going to sound like a really boring answer, but I almost do, I would say like 95% of my mud pies are just all in Serum. Like just taking and maybe making like a 4-bar long LFO that's just like the most crazy, ridiculous shapes, like really sharp, like pluck bits, and then little bits that weave up and then tail down. And then you have like this long, like random generator. And then you have like other bits of other LFOs that are, you know, more sweeping modulations or whatever on a sound. And then just screwing with that, because I feel like doing that yields me, because I know Serum so well. Like if I'm going for a certain kind of sound, I know how to get there, just or get close in Serum, and like I just always end up with something that I can then slot into the track a bit better. I like using Granulator. I like using Portal. But I find that when I start to use those like crazier things, I get something that has like such a specific use case that it's rare I return to it and actually get it into a song. When I'm just using like the tool that I probably know best in my DAW, which is Serum, like I just get to something cooler quicker, and there's something that ends up being more usable. Like for instance, Granulator, I love doing mud pies in that. You get just ridiculous, like crispy textural stuff, but it ends up being a little atonal. And so I just don't find as much use for it. But one thing for mud pies that is a synth that I do find super useful as of late is the last little bit of this question, which is my modular, which I figure might as well answer that little bit as part of this, because this is outside of Serum, which is normally 95% of my mud pies. This actually is a good creative tool. So for anyone into modular, I'm just going to run through this stuff and explain what it does. Maybe it'll spark an idea for something you could create similar in your DAW. So the first thing is IntelliGel scales, which basically takes CV and translates it into specific notes. Anyone that's not familiar with modular, a lot of like your pitch is just controlled by like big knobs, and it rarely lands just perfectly on a note. So having this allows you to like get things and like pitch sweeps to land on specific notes within it. Then I have Psych and CSL by Instro. Psych is a quad saw oscillator that has like interval detune, or like intervals, and then global detune and FM. It sounds really great. It can be a bit finicky sometimes if the oscillators aren't perfectly in tune, but then it also has like a nice quality to it, because when they're not perfectly in tune, that phasing creates like a re-C type feel to it, which I use like almost all my sounds. If I have two oscillators, they're like detuned between 10 and 25 cents from each other anyways, because I like the way that sounds. The CSL is like complex oscillator, does a bunch of crazy, just ridiculous world breaking sounds. It can be a bit unusable sometimes, but it has such a depth of sound quality to it that it's pretty fun. Then kick, a 2HP kick, which is literally just a kick generator. It takes a trigger and does a kick, but you can do different pitch, decay, and tone. It's really useful to like add transients to any like line of rhythm that you're doing. or just obviously kicks. Then marbles by Mutable Instruments, I believe. That might not be right, but marbles, it's a random generator, which is basically just like if you like the thing that I was talking about in Serum, like if you generate like a random bunch of stuff, like it kind of does something similar to that, but you can sync it to your tempo and like do different curves, like smoothly generated or like stepping and like patterns, like kick snare pattern type things that you can infuse. A plasma drive distortion by Erica Fusion, which is kind of but it's a plasma distortion. That sounds like very future bullshit, but it literally runs the sound through like a plasma tube, and the distortion that it generates is kind of like a fuzz, kind of like zero square in Serum, but more like between tube and zero square is like kind of what do you get, but it's like kind of, it's very interesting sounding. I like a lot. Then just like a filter module. Then WMD scalpel, which is like a morphing filter. It's, like if you take a bunch of auto filters and do like a neuro type thing where there's like lots of peaks and valleys and stuff that are like morphing between it. That's what I use that for. Another distortion by Ritual Electronics called Miasma, which is like the best sounding distortion fucking ever. I'll leave it at that. It's just a really fucking great distortion.
All of these sound really badass. Plasma tube distortion.
Dude, I literally was just like following the serotonin when I built this thing. I was like, I need lots of hardware distortion and cool sound sources and then stuff to fuck with it.
You made a good move.
An ADSR unit, which is just an envelope generator, super simple. Z5000 multi-effect, which is reverb, delay, and then chorus flanger type stuff. Just has a lot of cool and great sounding versions of reverbs, delays, and choruses. Mutable Instruments Ears, which is just a contact microphone with envelope shaping. You can like tap on it, or you could drag stuff across it, make like scraping sounds. You can set like the decay and release of it. I use that a lot as just like a nice like trigger that is more playable than just like an arcade button. Like you can like hit it harder or softer or scrape or like use weird stuff, like drag your LaCroix can across it and it'll create a very interesting sound. Then
it has to specifically be LaCroix though. No,
yeah, it has to be LaCroix.
Will work.
Only LaCroix.
Give us money, LaCroix.
Yes, please sponsor the podcast. Oh my God.
New LaCroix flavor. Mike touched the outside of it.
Softly caressed by a microphone, LaCroix. Yeah, definitely. Then just another, like, it's a module that came with this bottom case, which is just like some weird kind of broken sounding sound sources and LFOs. Then Portal, which is a harmonic distortion, which is like wave wrapping. So if you think of like normal, think of like a sine fold or linear fold in Serum Effects distortion wise, except instead of like just folding it, it like goes through the cycle and then puts all of that back into the next cycle up to 50 times. So it is unusable on anything that is a complex source, but when you take a simple source and run it through it, it is just ridiculous. And since it's a harmonic distortion, it like creates different basically it can like add a lot of warmth to the high end, but it gets unusable very quickly. All that to say, it is something that you can't really do in the digital world, which is why I was drawn to it, because it's just so different sounding. And then a comb filter and a quad VCA, which I just use as a mixer for the most part, but it has a nice drive to it. So yeah, the modulars, sound sources that are interesting and a lot of distortion and ways to screw them up.
Yeah.
It's fun stuff.
Now
if you have any questions about any of this, hit me up. I'd be
I'm
happy
gonna like
to show you.
flip it all the way over and do like, what are the simplest things you can do to get cool results? Because I've definitely ruined a hot amount of mud pies by trying to do too much.
Mhm.
Where it's like, oh, I'm going to have this distortion and that one and this chorus and this flanger and the phaser and this another distortion and a reverb. And it's just like, and you just end up with a soupy, undefined, crispy, overcooked sound where it's just like, this didn't turn out as anything useful. I've done that too many times. So if you're starting out, like, less can be more. Like, if you watch Ilgate's One Thing video that he did for Ableton, he talks about mudpies. What's he do? He says, oh yeah, you take your song or your line and you put a delay on it and you record yourself twisting the delay time knob. That's it. That's his one thing. Not you get 9 different things. Something as simple as just throwing a delay on there and messing with the delay can make amazing results. You can even like DJ scratch and pitch the shit. It can, you put the ping pong on, you get cool width effects. Sometimes it's like echoes. Sometimes if you have a shorter, time, it'll like just be width instead. Like there's a lot of ways you can use something really simple, like just a delay. You can also like just using the pitch wheel, on whatever synth you're doing, like messing with the pitch wheel can get some really cool mudpie results where, it's clearly the same sound, because that's one thing I was trying so much to get the craziest sound I could that it didn't sound like the sound it came from anymore. It didn't sound like a new version of that sound. It sounded like a whole different sound that was worse than the original sound. So as long as you're starting with a good sound, you can do pretty simple stuff as well.
Yeah, coming from the king of making things way too distorted, especially in a mud pie, and being like, no, more. Okay, now that's sick. And then like going back and listening to it, I'm like, fuck, no, I can't use any of this. What an idiot. When you're doing mud pies, if you have that tendency, just like somewhere in the loop, just back down the distortion and just give yourself the option to do less. Also, when you're doing a mud pie, think about giving yourself like narrow sounds and then wide sounds. Like every mud pie that I do, like if it's in Serum, like I'll do part of it with like both oscillators, just with one voice, and then with like multiple voices detuned and screwing with that, so that I have bits that when I'm sequencing it, you can have like the narrow sound followed by the wide sound in your sequence, and it makes it feel like this cool bit is right down the middle, and then all of a sudden, boom, like out in the sides. So think about that as well when you're doing your resamples.
Amen. That's a lot of good fodder for your future mud pies, Gus, and everybody else listening. Hope that helps a whole bunch. We even got some people in the chat saying some cool stuff, like, putting utility and redux and turning up the gain on the utility so the redux picks up the sound properly. Thanks, Nard.
Redux at 1 bit.
Yeah, 1 bit. There. Yeah, okay, yeah, get that real crunchy sound.
Is that like actually like bit reduction to 1 bit? Like that is incredibly bricked. That is fantastic. Nard.
Yeah, I got to try this.
Bravo. Because I like using Redux to like, if I want some like really harsh, harsh, crispy, like layer to something, like parallel process with a Redux at like maybe 3 or 4 on the bit reduction, and it just like squashes everything and like really brings out any character in it. But man, I don't know that I've ever gotten it down to 1 bit. That is adventurous. I like it.
Bit reduction is dope though. It's another good simple way to like add a lot of distortion and crunch out of your sound that is, usually stays useful in a lot of ways. Like I want to shout out something that Alexandra put me on to. There's Melda Production. If you guys go to the Melda Production website, meldaproduction.com, they've got like a whole suite of free plugins that a lot of them are extremely useful for effects and mud pies. A couple in there that I've been using are MBitFun and MComb, the comb filter and the bit crusher. There's a few others that I've been playing with, but those are two of the most reliable ones in there for me to get cool sounds. Yeah, very good stuff.
Super dope.
Yeah,
Nard also brought up a great tip, asking, do we use autofilter in Bandpass to create the vibrato-y underwater kind of sound? Yeah, for anybody that's not using the LFO and autofilter and autopan and those plugins, like, definitely take advantage of that. You can get some really cool, like, stereo wideness, and keeping in mind that the more stereo a sound is, the bigger it sounds, but the less focused it sounds compared to something more mono. If you have build-ups or if you have intros or sections you're trying to make feel really vast, having that kind of swirling LFO with differences between the left and right is such a dope trick that you can do to really make your sections come to life. And I do that all the time. I just don't use a actual note value for it. I'll typically just take the LFO off the rate, and then I'll resample it a couple times. And now with comping in Ableton, I'll just take kind of my favorite bits, and I can get that filter movement exactly how I want it, so that it's like opening and closing at very specific points in my song. But I love that trick. Y'all should definitely try that if you haven't.
Yeah. And shouts to Sephros for saying glitch machines and unfiltered audio plugins. They've definitely got some weird stuff. I've got a couple of each that definitely some strange stuff. If you're trying to like make stuff sound normal, it's not gonna happen. But if you're trying to go weird, those got some very good, like you said, the presets are really dope. And oh yeah, Nard chiming in on the Redux. He says once you get it to the Redux down to 1 bit, you actually need the gain to get the sound to punch through the Redux. Otherwise, it'll just turn into bleh noise.
Yeah, that's really the brilliant part, because I love how ridiculous the tone gets when you crank it all the way down. But yeah, you're right. It normally just turns into like just hiss. But I've never tried just gaining something into it to get more of the character out. So that's what I said. I need to try that right after the stream, because I love the way that it affects the tone as you bring that down, but I've never actually been able to get it usable. So that seems to be quite the hot tip there, bud.
Big up, Nard.
Big up!
Goosetronics has a good question here. How much do you use arrangement exercises to start tracks? How about you, Luke?
That's a great question. Well, again, that kind of varies, but I'll probably do one, maybe about like once a month is probably my rate right now, maybe a little less. I haven't been writing a ton of new songs lately, though, so it might be more if I was in more of a general. I'm finishing tracks right now more than I'm starting them, but some of my favorite tracks I'm trying to finish right now all started from arrangement exercises. But really, I think like, anytime you hear a track where you just go like, ooh, how'd they do this? That's a great one to start with. It's like one, I was like listening to the local EDM station and I was almost home and this song came on. I was like, I don't know what this is, but I need to recreate it. Quick, Shazam, please help me out. And luckily it was Shazamable. And then another one where I was like doing track feedback and I finished my last track feedback and the song finished and it cut to another random song on SoundCloud. And it's just like, I don't know what this is, but I need to do an arrangement exercise starting ASAP. So yeah, probably about like once a month or once every 6 weeks. But, I've done a lot. I recommend people who are starting out, especially people, trying to get that orange belt or that blue belt, like do one once a week, like make that your daily writing day. Like spend your nighttime sessions putting together sounds and palettes and, making all of that prep stuff we talk about, like getting a bunch of cool sounds all together so that when you start the arrangement exercise, it's not like, oh, we need a kick. Let me go dig through for a kick. It's just like, we've got like 20 kicks at my fingertips. Which one sounds kind of like this tune? Close enough. Let's go. What's the kick doing? And make the pattern, How about you guys?
How about you, Evan?
Yeah, so honestly, gosh, I used to do the arrangement exercise so often. In that like 1 to 4 year time span for like, cutting your teeth at production, I used to do it so often. Like 1 in 4 tracks, I probably started with an arrangement exercise. And as I've grown into, trying to get a bit more I don't know, experimental with what I'm doing. I found that nowadays when I start a track with an arrangement exercise, I'm too self-conscious about am I making it too similar to the original? And like I end up just thinking about it too much. And nowadays, like we've talked about, like the biggest problem is no longer how do I use these tools? It's how do I do something unique with them? And my own roadblock is thinking too much about how someone else would do this instead of just thinking, okay, how would I do this? And so I take a lot of inspiration, like always listening to music critically and taking a lot of inspiration for how sections are working. But I've found that nowadays I just kind of end up trying, because once you understand arrangement, like basically like there's not a whole lot of like ridiculous stuff you can do with different arrangements once you understand like the few different directions you can go with each section. I find my writing process to be a bit smoother when I'm not thinking about what I have to do in that section based on the song that came before it, instead of like what does it feel like the song wants to do here. But I can't stress this enough, that answer, I don't want that to steer anyone else away from doing the arrangement exercise. If you don't already have like an incredibly solid understanding of arrangement, and if you ever get stuck arranging a song, you still need to do more. And the arrangement exercise cannot be understated how important and valuable it is, because it literally is the easiest way to learn effective arrangement techniques. And you're really not actually going to get that close to the song that you started with if you're not trying to copy it. If you're just using the arrangement and you like the song, like you're going to come up with something completely different anyways. So more is better until you have a really, really solid of arrangement, how it works.
Yeah. And remember, like the arrangement exercise gets you started. I like to tell people like, oh, I'm not trying to copy other people. Well, it's like, look at the three of us right here. You look at the three of us on your screen, and even though on a skeletal and organ, all that, like there's so many levels where we are basically the same person. Our DNA is 99.7% the same. And there's like this little bit of like what kind of clothes we dress in, what our face looks like, what hairstyle do we got going on that makes us easily recognizable as a completely different human being in a lineup. But that's the part, like, but like underlying that in a song, like, so the lead melody, the patch you chose, whatever the vocal is in the pre-drop, those things make it your song. But like how sections are laid out, how buildups are used to create tension, how the drum beat works as a team to make a groove, like all that shit is like the underlying pieces that like make a human able to stand up and walk around and talk to you. That shit, don't reinvent the wheel. Like, you want to make a trap song? Go listen to a sick trap song, figure out how it works, and then make your own lead on the trap song.
Amen. Yeah, I do the arrangement exercise any single time I hear a track and I'm like, ooh, that's different. I haven't done that. Let me try that. Now, as far as arrangement itself for instrumental stuff, I feel like, with where I'm at, I have a strong understanding of arrangement and how to manipulate it. And I would say a good rule is I would just call it the 2-3 rule. I don't even know if it really makes sense if I can fully encapsulate it in this one thought. But basically, the third time, if you have like ABC, 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 the third time that something would happen, say the A, if your A is the verse, where verse 3 would be, typically that's where you want to throw the curveball. Maybe verse 2 has some sort of variation, but where that verse 3 would be, instead of repeating again, go to a bridge or do some sort of drastic change. And then if you have, you could have a 17-minute song, and if you always like look at it in those kind of chunks, where it's like the last third is some sort of departure, and then you could keep stacking that kind of recursively to build like an infinite arrangement. That's kind of how I look at it. But I still continue to do the arrangement exercise with vocal arrangement. Like vocals has been something I'm going in on for the last couple of years. And there's just no way in hell I could sing like T-Pain, or I could sing like, some of these amazing vocalists who are doing all these harmonies and stacks and blah, blah, blah. So that's something I sit down and study R&B singers and see, how are they doing this? Okay, cool. How are metal singers doing this? How do I now combine these different styles of phrasing? It kind of ties into Abe's question from earlier. A huge part of how I learned phrasing was through doing the arrangement exercise on other people's tracks and then trying to find commonalities. So let's say in your verse, you got one vocal layer. In your pre-chorus, you got a vocal and then 2 hard pan layers. And then your hooks, you got 4 hard pan layers and the center vocal. That's such an easy formula that you could just mindlessly do every song and build on top of and get like really articulate sounding vocals. So that's just stuff I found through arrangement exercises, and yeah, I'm gonna continue to do those for sure.
That's a really good tip. I'm gonna definitely do that, because vocal phrasing, even though we talked about it already and had some tips, it's still so difficult, and there's so much room to grow, especially for me. And I hadn't thought to do that, like do the arrangement exercise with like how a vocal flows. And I'm definitely going to do that this week. That's brilliant.
It really helps demystify like how many layers do I actually need for vocals to make them sound full and upfront. And it's like way more than you would think when you first start.
Yeah. Amen. So the moral of the story is do arrangement exercises, do them on more things than you thought you could do them on.
Yeah.
And feel free to, combine it with what you're already doing and experiment with it, and, ask somebody in track feedback or in your sensei session or just a homie that listens to good music. Like, is this working when you're making the experiment? So if also that, get up and dance trick, like the main reason for the arrangement exercise is to create something that flows. Like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah. Like this many bars for the intro and these kind of elements helped build the tension up. And then this is how many elements were there when the drop hit the first time. Like I like to tell people this in my private sessions. Like I used to think, oh, the drop's hitting and it needs to be crazy. It needs to really hit people. So I better stack a lot of shit right there. And then I realized after a while, like, wait a second, I'm at the club and I'm headbanging. I'm going crazy to this song that just dropped. The bass hit and I started going nuts. And I realized like, this is a kick, a snare, and a distorted 808. There are 3 elements happening right now. And I'm losing my absolute shit because it's hitting so heavy. And it's like, wow, I don't need to. Then, like, if you give them everything at once, you've got nowhere to go but down. Now it's like, it's everything. It's confusing. And now it's less than that. And I'm kind of bored. As opposed to like, wow, those 3 elements sound great. A 4th one comes in, a hi-hat. Now I want to move my hand like this. And if I hadn't paid attention to the arrangement exercises, I wouldn't have ever learned that shit. Like, like all my favorite songs are coming in with way less at the part where it felt like more. But they're doing it, they're setting shit up well. They're, like like thinking about things like, filtering stuff out, making stuff small, like listen during the buildup. They, shit gets filtered out. The reverb gets turned up, shit gets turned down, like the far away rack or the drop rack brings everything in and further away. And then boom, everything hits again. Like those kinds of energetic moves that help the flow of the track and make you want to move to it are the real parts to be paying attention to underneath the arrangement exercise. Like what key is their melody in? Who cares? Write this song in any key you feel like. How did it move you, and why was it able to do that? Like, that's what you're really digging for in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nard has a great question here, and I can't wait to hear your guys' answer.
Yeah.
He says, meta question: when you're feeling absolutely drained and out of energy, but you know you need to finish your music, do you force yourself to do it? And if so, what's your ritual for getting your head in the game and pumping yourself full of adrenaline to do music?
Man, that is a really good question. I mean, the past month, honestly, I've been on a little bit of a slump for how much I'm working on actual music. Like, I'm still getting shit done and doing stuff. I had some releases and trying to figure out Facebook ads, the new changes, yada, 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 producing the podcast. But when it comes to actually making the music, I was really gung ho up until about a month ago. And I was kind of burnt out on my tracks. And I decided, you know what? I'm just going to take some time off of these tracks and not dive into them for a while so I can hear them with fresh ears. Because it's like, oh man, I got to make another set of changes to this song. It's the fucking 10th draft. I'm tired of this shit. And so I just decided not to, and that can be a healthy thing to take a break on for a while. And now that I'm coming back to these songs, it feels a lot better. But I mean, shit, caffeine never hurts when you really got to get into something, oh, you know what? I was kind of tired after work and I knew I had to be on it for this podcast. So I made a pot of tea and I set it next to me and I've been sipping tea this whole time. And it's a lot easier to talk fast and think fast than it was, about an hour and a half ago. So, then, what works for you to generally get your energy up? Working out, going and taking a walk, listening to some music that gets you really pumped up and then jump into working on your music. What gets you pumped up in general? Because that'll get you pumped up to make the music too.
Man, this is such a good question.
Yeah.
This is the question for producers, because it's not like you feel like going through the arduous process of finishing music every day, especially when you sit down and you're a little tired or you're not really in the zone. And you want to be excited about the song because when you first made it, you were really excited about it and you need to get it out there. But then you sit down and you just kind of, oh man, you listen to it, you hear some stuff wrong with it and you just don't have the gumption to fix all of the complicated problems if it's one of the difficult ones. Such a good question. I'll offer a couple things that help me, but honestly, the main thing to keep in mind with this question is that it is okay to not feel excited about that song you were excited about when you first made it, because there's just no way that you can predict how you're going to feel on any given day when you sit down to work on music. It's not a linear process. You can't force yourself to feel better about something. It just doesn't work like that. The only thing that I can say confidently always does help is pushing through that first initial resistance. And if you can make any sort of progress, that will start to build some momentum, some excitement, and reinforce itself into getting some progress done. Maybe you only have enough gas to get an hour's worth of work and you just fix that one difficult thing in that one section that's been bugging you, or make progress on it. That's a win. And you got to be okay with the fact that some days you're going to sit down and get a bunch done on that song. And some days you needed to rewrite that drop B and you spent 5 hours and just got the bones of that rewrite done. That's going to happen too. That happened to me the other day. Some specific techniques that I've found to work. If you sit down to work on a song or something and you feel a little, you just don't have a bunch of gas in the tank, do not do anything other than open Ableton when you sit down at your computer. If you open SoundCloud and check out your stats or whatever, you go to some other website, you go to YouTube and you watch a funny video, the transition from that dopamine of doing something that's not hard to do, that is enjoyable, and then trying to transition from that into working on music, finishing music, which is arguably very hard and mentally exhaustive. It's so much harder to get yourself into that mindset once you've already gotten the dopamine from whatever else is on your computer. Don't check your phone. Don't sit down, open Ableton, and open up Instagram while it's loading. I know that project might take 5, maybe even 10 minutes to open if it's really complicated. Stand up, stretch, walk around the studio, anything but distract yourself and give yourself any other reason to be focused on anything else. Because the biggest hurdle, like I said, is starting and getting anything done, literally one thing done in that song. And then that reinforces itself into the next thing. And then you start making progress. If you shortcut into literally anything else that distracts you, gives your mind a break, getting that first thing done is going to seem harder. And then it's just a greater uphill battle. Turn on your computer, open Ableton, do nothing else except maybe stretch, and just start working on that first thing. And you give yourself a much better chance at actually being able to break through into progress. But like I said, even if you do everything right and you open up Ableton, you start working on it, you still might be like, oh, I'm gassed. I just can't. This isn't working right now. And in that case, that's okay. Figure out something else that does offer you some excitement. Maybe you just got a new plugin. Move that session to another day when you need to finish that song and just have some fun in the DAW, because that is a way to keep your mental approach, or your mental relationship with Ableton positive. If you open up Ableton and every time you got to do something difficult, your brain's going to be like, oh, opening up Ableton is going to be hard. And you get this weird resistance to it. If you allow yourself on those days where you tried, you really did, you didn't distract yourself, you gave yourself every possible chance to win, and you still just can't, that's okay. But then move to something that's fun. And that way you can reinforce, it doesn't have to be hard every time. And then you're still doing something productive. You still feel good about yourself. Still got hours in the studio working on something that's pushing your passion forward. And that way you can kind of, and maybe after 30 minutes of screwing with that new plugin, maybe you're in the zone at that point. You go back to that, you open that project back up, and you're able to get there. But yeah, that's for me the 10,000 foot view of how to do that.
No, I really like that. To touch back on my little break / slump where I wasn't feeling like working on music, and then I had one day okay, actually some of these I got to get back to now. Really, how am I going to start? It feels like this big pile of songs, and I looked through. I've the notes that I got from feedback, and I found one that had the fewest, easiest notes. And I started there, and it was all right, cool. 20 minutes, I was able to get all those 3 notes knocked out and bounce that track. And it was yes, I got one done. I did it. Oh man, it feels so good. So starting with something easy to get that that adrenaline, that dopamine, that serotonin, whatever chemical your body needs to start going, whatever internal cocktail, oh yes, I did it. And then before I knew it, I had finished 4 drafts in the evening. Because I was dreading I was fuck, I don't want to do this. This is tough. It seems like a mountain of work. And next thing you know, 4 of the tracks I had to work on are done. And I was oh, the seal's broken. I can just do any of these whenever now. Cool. But yeah, sometimes starting with the easy thing helps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally. I have a few mindset things, a few practical things, but I want to just be the first to say I am not the best at moderation, and I am not the best at, chilling and taking it easy and all that kind of stuff. And I lead myself to burnout, couple times a year, let's say. And take this all with a grain of salt. That being said, I found the more I can stay focused and keep a good overview of where my priorities are, I don't burn out. And so the first thing I would say is figure out how high up on that priority list music is. And then every time when you have personal time, ask yourself some comparison questions on what is my to-do list, and ask yourself for everything. Is it mandatory? Does it need to get done by a certain time and when? And how important is it? So maybe family's first for you and then it's music, right? So be picking up your kids first if that's up on the list. But, I don't shower on a day where I have the whole day free. I don't do dishes. I don't do bullshit like fold clothes. I don't do anything because the place time escapes you is not in that thing that will obviously take you 3 hours. It's in that thing that you're like, oh, this will take me 10 minutes. Oh, and then I might as well do this. That'll only take 5. And then bam, your whole day's derailed. So fuck that. That is the literal devil, is those 5 to 10 minute little time wasters. You need to be really weary of those. And yeah, straight up on the days where I know I have a full day, I'm going to be a stinky boy. My dishes are going to be dirty and I'm going to be at the computer all day because it is really hard to get into flow state. And once you're in it, do not underestimate, what it means to get to that point. Like sometimes that means not eating, and I'm not saying any of these are good things. Sometimes that means not getting to that thing that I probably should have done, but wasn't mandatory. So fuck it. I'm going to write a song because nothing's getting in the way of today. That's the kind of mentality I have that helps me get through that. Now, on the other side of that coin, I also don't do anything musically that I don't feel like doing. So I know how exhausting it is to come home after a hard day of work and try to be creative. So I don't try to write a song. Or if I got an hour, I don't want to get an hour into a song. I want to use that hour to successfully complete a task. And because I'm showing up every day, I want to be stacking wins every day. So I don't write a track unless I'm feeling creatively inspired. So the way I see it is I have an available day where I'm feeling productive and creatively inspired. That equals write a track. Then I'll have days where I'm not feeling creatively inspired, but I'm feeling productive. I'll either work on an old track or I'll do some kind of session. I'll make instrumentals. I'll make drop ideas. I'll make whatever. Then I have days where I'm just exhausted and I feel like life's kicked my ass. Maybe 1 out of 10 or 15 of those, I will actually be so wiped out that I will just take the day and chill. But more often than not, I find I'm just overwhelmed by the thought of I need to write a song. And so I will kick back and I will watch Family Guy and I will dick around. But I do a sound generation session like I mentioned earlier. And I only need to keep one headphone in and I can see what Peter Griffin's saying and whatnot. And I can make 300 bass noises while using 1% of my mental CPU that I definitely have in most cases. So I also, on the contrary, by the way, if I have a full day and it's a writing day, fuck sound design, fuck arrangement exercises, all of that. It is purely a writing day because you definitely have all of the content you need in that moment to write a good song. Don't feel like you're lacking anything because it gets you in that scarcity mindset. You have all of the tools available, even with the stock stuff your dog gives you, to go in and make a song that you would be proud of. So yeah, go into full creation mode, not editing mode, not sound design mode, none of that. Be very mindful of your time. Now, I also try to consume music related content outside of work just to keep that residual kind of attention there at all times and keep a part of my mental CPU constantly thinking of what I want to do next musically, how to move forward. It's honestly a huge part of my life. And at sometimes I feel like I'm a lot, even for my music friends sometimes, because I'm all in. But figure out to what extent you're all in, because if you value anything more than that, you're going to want to make time for that. And lastly, some of the other things I think about are one day you're going to want to make music and you're not going to be able to. And that's the last day that you will have made music is going to pass you right by without you even knowing it, probably. So think about that intentfully and deeply, and think about what it would feel like to really want to do this thing you love and you are not capable of doing it. And the other thing is, again, depending on how high in your priority list music is, maybe your mileage may vary. But one thing I think about is like, just because I feel a certain way, and again, keep your mental health in check, but just because I feel a certain way doesn't mean I can't get something done that day regardless. And I know the thing that's going to move my career forward is not how I feel, but it's about what sort of output I have. And so one thing I think about is like, all right, I've chosen that I want to do this as like the center of my life. This is what I feel like I was born to do. So in those moments where I feel creatively exhausted, again, I make it easy for myself to do something and stack some sort of win. But I also just recognize like, all right, I've chosen to take this one step farther than most people will. So this is most people's breaking point. So it's just like, hello, I've hit a milestone. Like, we got to keep it rolling anyway, because I haven't chosen to do the amount of work your average like hobbyist would do. I've chosen to take on more work. So getting to that point is just like, all right, we're getting started now. I try not to get overwhelmed by it and like let that thought consume me of how much I have to do. But it's just like, all right, cool. Let's just keep it pushing little bit by little bit. Here is the supposed breaking point. Let me just try and keep pushing it a bit by bit. And oftentimes I'll just fall right back into flow state and keep it moving. So yeah, think about that. It's how bad do you really want it, and keep working towards that. I obviously want to see everybody come up, but the little competitive side of me is like, oh, okay, bet this is when most people would have stopped. All right, cool. Let's kick it up ×2. Let's get that coffee pot. Let's keep it rolling.
Yeah, there's you make a good point on that last bit as well, with like whatever you can do to like get that little extra bit of motivation, even if like maybe you shouldn't have a pot of coffee at 8 p.m. if you got to work the next day. But if you really are on a deadline, or like you really like, I'm going to do this, like follow that like sometimes like pushing to the nth degree of what you should or shouldn't do because you love this, that is like almost like a healthy indulgence in your passion, right? Like take it over the top. Like don't do it all the time, but like sometimes it feels like to just really like, nope, like I'm having a pot of coffee at 8 p.m. F this, like this is what I love doing. I'm not feeling it right now, and I'm going to make myself do it because there's nothing else I'd rather do with my life. And like using the macro as like the guide to like sometimes just really indulge in, hammering down on that thing,
Amen.
So yeah, you only YOLO once. So don't forget that, ninjas.
Yeah.
Amen. Yeah, I think that's a good place to leave it. I mean, just a big old mic drop on that, We covered some good ones. Thank you everybody for the great questions. That was really fun.
Big up chat.
Yeah, big
up the chat. And holler at me on the interwebs. I'm at Luke Rain Music or at What Would Trap Jesus Do, wherever you want to follow me. Tesco, how do they find you?
At I am Tesco on all socials. And I thought of one more gem. This has probably been the biggest life-changing thing for me personally.
Let's go.
There was a bit in a Joe Rogan special or something where he was talking about he was just talking about how like part of being stupid is you're not aware that you're stupid. So if you think you're not stupid, you're probably stupid. And so just recognizing that I am a dumb monkey trying to get through life and and my body is pulling me to do monkey things, and I'm trying to have this greater purpose and all that, is that I'm not always going to be on my best behavior. I'm not always going to have 100% motivation. I'm not always going to want to do the things I should be doing. So I just make it hard to do the things I shouldn't be doing. I cannot stress how important this is. Like, I still play video games, but very, 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 very rarely, because I unplug my system after I'm done using it, and I put the game back in its case, and I put the controller away, and I unplug the TV, and I make that hard. On the days when I really wanted to go in on recording vocals and I was in my apartment, I flipped my couch on the side and made a makeshift vocal recording booth in the center of my apartment so that I literally could not do shit else. And I went in for that week. And that's really the way you have to do it, is recognize that if everything, you are not exempt. Everything in nature follows the path of least resistance. So if you want whatever your greater purpose in life is, make that the path of least resistance. Make everything else way harder to do, and you will more often than not do the thing you're supposed to do. And on the days when you really don't want to, fuck it. Treat yourself. Have that ritual of plugging in the PS5 and packing yourself a bowl and all of that, and go in that day. But put it away when you're done so that tomorrow you're not fighting your own willpower to get there again.
Amen.
Love it.
But yeah, I am Tesco on all socials.
Oh yeah, so I thought he had dropped the mic, but nah, that one he just fucking end zone spiked that shit for us. Wow. Boom.
I like
Hey,
it.
I'm not gonna lie, dude. That's been the
it.
biggest thing, like biggest game changer in my life. Get mentors, get people that are gonna keep you accountable, people that are gonna make sure you show up when you don't want to, and make that shit hard to do that you're not supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Accepting that you are a monkey and everything else is working against you. You gotta accept that to actually make progress.
Yo, you ever see that meme where it's like when you come home from a hard day of work and it's a business dude, and then the next picture is a chimp and it says "Return to Monkey," and it's like MONKE, and it's just like really like primitive looking monkey picture. That's how it feels for real.
It does.
Return
it really
to
does.
Monkey.
Yeah, I gotta do that every once in a while for sure. Go full ape mode.
Yeah, you gotta sometimes
be like, nope.
Yeah,
fucking binge on some shit and get high and eat all the bad foods, and okay, cool, got that out of my system. Put, like you said, that you gotta put them all away.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're all just sitting there. It's like, oh, I mean, there's cookies on the counter when I woke up, so that was breakfast. Fuck. Started my day off wrong.
Oh man, what a bow! What if?
How about you, Evan? Where do people keep up with these amazing releases that you've been putting out lately, and that you're going to continue to put out?
You can keep up with me at all the socials at Rip Kenny Music everywhere. Pretty simple. Shout out Nard for the fantastic question, by the way.
Shout out all y'all. Thank you so much for kicking it with us.
Real shit.
And
yeah, glad you were here
questions.
too, Nard. Chiming in the chat.
Big up chat, big up friends. Yeah. Thank you for kicking it with us tonight. This is fun.
Shout out Frostbite. The release is probably going to be in 2-3 weeks from when we film this.
Yep.
Shout outs to everybody in the live chat. You can catch us live on Dojo TV every other week. If you're a fan and you're not doing that, you're missing out. Come hang.
Yeah, and if not, holler at us at thehumanmusicpodcast.com and subscribe on your favorite places and leave comments and likes and ratings and reviews.
Hit all the buttons. Hit every button.
Smash buttons. Leave positive comments. It helps. We appreciate y'all. And peace out. And of course, peace among worlds. Woo! Woo! Woo!
All right, humans, thank you so much for hopping on. That was another great episode. Big up chat for those dope questions. You know, make sure you smash that like, the subscribe, drop a comment, rating, review. Help us get out to more producers just like you, because it really does help. You would be surprised. We highly appreciate all that stuff. Please support our sponsors. If you're supporting them, you're supporting us. First, Dojo TV. It's free. Like this podcast, you will love Dojo TV. Next, the weekly download, where you can learn from Ill Gates in his private weekly group lessons and get access to over 230 more episodes in the archive. Just $20 a month. That's $5 an episode or less on weeks where there's 5 Wednesdays a month. Guest practices, where you can learn from Seth Drake at the Approach Institute. High key, the best engineer we know. Super high level mixing and mastering, engineering knowledge that you can get from this dude. Your first class with guest practices is free, so you can make sure you know how dope it is before you spend any money. Finally, once your tunes are sounding all good from the Producer Dojo and from guest practices with Seth Drake, you can get them out to all the streaming services with Gvngaroo Records music distribution. Unlimited uploads for under $10 a year. Not a better deal out there, people. And make sure you tune in with us next week, where we're set to be back with Paige Turner, somebody who's done a really good job at getting his beats sold to tons of rappers. You'll definitely want to hear this episode. Really looking forward to bringing it to you. So, till then, peace out, humans, and peace among worlds.
I like it.